Hey everybody, this is Flash McKenna, and you're listening to Top of the Morning, presented by TopRopeReport.com.
Good morning once again, everybody. Welcome to Top of the Morning, presented by TopRopeReport.com. We are up to episode number 5 this week, and our guest for the second time on the show is TopRopeReport.com columnist and results specialist, Mr. Doug Berrill, here to talk about all the big news in the WWE over the, past week and a half. So we discuss all the drama surrounding Paige and her situation with the company, all the fan backlash about her situation, and kind of the vitriol towards the WWE about her suspension. Of course, the big news this week from Monday Night Raw, the return after 12 long years of Bill Goldberg to accept Brock Lesnar's challenge for a match that has not been confirmed, but is believed to be taking place at Survivor Series. On SmackDown Live, we discussed the James Ellsworth situation between himself and the WWE World Champion AJ Styles, also involving Dean Ambrose. We talk about the SAnitY gimmick from NXT, how Eric Young is helping to elevate some unnamed or lesser-known superstars. We also get into Hideo Itami's unfortunate injury, discuss whether or not this guy is ever going to catch a break, the recent surgery for The Undertaker, and his possible future at WrestleMania. But before we get into that, once again, we would just like to give a big shout out to our pals Referee Tony S. and Chip K. Fabe over at the Checkin' the Boots podcast. They have some great content over there, very entertaining show. They come out every Saturday, as do we on Saturday mornings. You can get them on iTunes for free. Subscribe to the show like me. Be a cool kid and check out Checkin' the Boots. So, let's head into our guest this week. Once again, here's the WWE Week in Review with my good buddy, Doug Berrill. So once again, ladies and gentlemen, back for the second time on the show, we have columnist and results specialist, TopRopeReport.com's Doug Berrill. Doug, thanks again for taking some time. How goes the battle today?
It goes pretty well. You know, the last time you introduced me, you were talking about me losing fantasy football, but I turned it around.
Now this time I was hoping that you weren't going to bring up fantasy football.
Yeah, 2-game winning streak, baby.
I don't even know what to say. I've told a bunch of people over the weekend that if you looked at my lineup, you would sit back and think, without knowing the record, like, this has got to be one of the better teams in the league. So to me, I can't make any sense of it whatsoever. I don't know what the hell's going on.
Yeah, I can't either because I really liked your team.
Yeah, so, do you have anybody going tonight? Which everybody knows we record on Thursdays, even though this won't be heard until Saturday. So tonight we got Green Bay and Chicago. You got anybody in the old lineup this evening?
No, I had Jeremy Langford, but of course he's on the shelf.
Yeah, I kind of have to stick with Aaron Rodgers, even though he's been playing like crap. I mean, what are you really going to do other than that? You just kind of...
Yeah, he's Aaron Rodgers. You know that if you put him on the bench, he's going to blow up.
Yeah, you kind of got to leave him in there. I'm taking a little bit of a risk tonight. I'm going to bench Demaryius, and I'm going to go with the red-hot Cameron Meredith and see what happens. So
there you go.
Hopefully we can get away from this 2-4 record. But, okay, on to this episode is the Week in Review, even though we're going to cover some big news from last week to start off. There hasn't been too much really to speak about this week. So going back to last week, the big story was, of course, Paige and the ongoing saga between her and the WWE. So I think to fully understand what's been going on with her, we kind of need to take a look at the timeline, head back a couple of months. So back on August 3rd, it was officially announced that Paige was being pulled from the company's tour of Australia and New Zealand that week, which was the first we heard about her sustaining an injury, even though the last time she was on TV was, I believe, the end of July. So she's been battling neck, shoulder issues for the last couple of months. So fast forward a couple of weeks after that, and on August 18th, her and her real-life boyfriend, the now former WWE superstar Alberto Del Rio, both suspended for their first violation of the company wellness policy. There was some rumors and a little bit of rumblings that Alberto had tested positive for steroids. We never did find out exactly the full story or the true story on Paige. She did address it later on, saying that she didn't fail a test. It was merely a procedural issue, similar to Eva Marie's suspension. So who knows what you believe there. So that, going forward a month, that suspension is finally over for Paige. Alberto has come to terms on his release from the company. And there was a lot more drama that happened, as Paige had reportedly hired legal counsel in an effort to quit the company, most likely because of her relationship with Del Rio. Now, of course, Paige is still under contract with the company until 2019, so they were able to work everything out. There was some little bit of rumors that she might be returning to television. However, her injury issues have not subsided. Again, fast forwarding to last week, and now Paige has been suspended for the second time, leading to a whole new whirlwind of drama between herself and the company, to which the company actually came out and released a statement to the New York Post because there was so much backlash from Paige and from fans and from Paige's father, reportedly claiming that the company's not taking her injury seriously, which we now know that the WWE doctors don't feel she needs neck surgery, which she had yesterday successfully. Of course, Paige her doctors were of a different opinion, and the company WWE even came out and said that she failed a test for an illegal substance, and it was not for painkillers, such as her father had claimed. So, to kind of wrap all this up, Doug, I know you wrote about this last Friday, with the newest issue of your column, Doug's Day Device, called Paging All Soraya Marks. So what are your overall feelings? I know people can go back and read the column, but kind of sum it up for us on how you think this whole drama has really been playing out.
Well, they said they were claiming it was a procedural thing, but when she and Del Rio both got suspended at the same time, you always have to raise an eyebrow when a couple gets suspended simultaneously, because they might have access to the same product that could have possibly caused them to get a ding on the wellness policy. The piece was really motivated by the reaction to the fans. And I'll say this, if Paige is not long for WWE, then that is going to be on her. And like you said, at one point she'd hired legal counsel and she was considering quitting. If she ends up leaving the company sometime in the next calendar year, that's going to be the ball's going to be in her court. The thing that was driving me crazy and what really motivated me to write about that was seeing all these people thinking that they were trying to strong-arm her by suspending her for a second time, as if they were trying to get rid of her. WWE has no plans to get rid of her. They hope that she comes back, and that she comes back in good graces, and that she has a good run. She's only 24 years old. She's supremely talented. She has plenty of a future. She sells merchandise like crazy. So the fans that were getting mad at the WWE for suspending her for a second time, I thought that was a little crazy. As far as her having the neck surgery and the WWE doctors not thinking that it was required, I'm not a doctor and I don't know all the details of her injury, so I cannot speak to that part of it. But yeah, if you think that the WWE is trying to get rid of Paige, think again. If she leaves the company, that'll just be on her.
Yeah, I agree with you 100%. I saw a lot of backlash from the fans or WWE Universe, whatever you want to call them, all over social media about the same things, and I know that we had talked a little bit about your column heading into it, just so you can bounce some ideas off of me. Also of note that I think people are forgetting is that when she did work things out with the company after she had reportedly hired a lawyer to try and quit, get out of her contract, there was also word that the company was close to firing her. So if they really wanted to get rid of her, they would just fire her. They wouldn't go through this BS, for lack of a better term.
They don't have to put undue pressure. If they want her out, then she's going to be out. And I think the other part that I wrote in the column was, look, I loved her in NXT, and once she made her main roster debut, she immediately became one of, if not my favorite member of the women's division on the main roster. So I'm a big fan of her, but I think the problem that some people have when they're a fan, they make excuses for, people that they're a fan of, and so it takes a little bit for somebody to look at somebody that's like, I'm a fan of this person, but I can admit when they're wrong. I think that's hard for people to do sometimes. So I said, look, guys, I love Paige, but she screwed up. And whether you're a Paige fan or not, you need to just look at it the way it is. And she screwed up.
Right, exactly. I definitely agree with that. Why on earth would the WWE want to do this and essentially drag their own name through the mud and deal with all of this backlash just as a way to try and, poke her, get her going, as a means to get rid of her? It makes absolutely no sense whatsoever. And then going back to the doctors, if WWE feels like she doesn't need surgery, again, I'm not a doctor either, but regardless of all the CM Punk stuff, the lawsuits going on with him and him accusing them of some form of malpractice, this is the same company that won't allow Daniel Bryan, after getting clearance from multiple doctors across the country, just because it's not safe. So if there was any inkling that they thought that she needed this surgery, I would tend to believe them.
There is no doubt in my mind that when it comes to WWE, they're playing it safe. When you look back at probably the last 10 years, particularly ever since the Chris Benoit tragedy, when it comes to things like concussions, they are more inclined to play it safe than anything else. So you're right. This company, who is always going to play the safe card, is saying, no, I don't think you need neck surgery. It's tough to argue with, because they kind of treat everything with kids' gloves now because of lawsuits that they've faced from prior superstars for not taking care of them properly.
Right, they're still going through a concussion lawsuit right now.
Right. Yeah, and so they are very inclined to play it safe. And so if this company that plays it maybe too safe is saying you don't need surgery, well, like we both said, we're not doctors, but you kind of have to believe them a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you're spot on, where a lot of people are just using their love of her to try and find some way to justify her, ultimately what's her wrongdoing. Like you said, she's only 24, and to me, I feel like she suffers from what I like to call the child star syndrome, where she's been in the ring since she was 13 years old. So she's always been in the limelight of some sort. And anybody that watches Total Divas with her on it, she's absolutely bat bleep, okay? Like, I think there's no two ways about it. She's incredibly immature. You know, supposedly she's now proposed to Del Rio, when it's like, if you watch that show, she was engaged to some dude just last year. So how good is her decision-making, honestly, if you really sit back? A lot of people forget that about us, too. You know, we'll have an opinion on something, I think more so me and you, where we'll look at something from a complete outside perspective, no matter how we feel about that person as a character. You know, if they do something wrong, we definitely have more of a tendency to tell it like it is. Like a perfect example, I've had this conversation with you before. For those that know us, I'm a New England Patriots fan. Doug is a diehard San Francisco 49ers fan, and I mean diehard because they've had some rough years and he's still with them. But I have even asked Doug before, Doug, honestly, in your opinion, who's the greatest quarterback ever? And it would be very, very easy for you to sit back and just say Joe Montana because you're a 49ers guy. But no, you sat back, you looked at the whole picture, and you were honest about it and said it's probably Tom Brady. So I think a lot of people, you know, the fans will always try and justify the actions of a superstar, whether it's justified or not. Whereas we have to look at the whole picture, because while we can still wear that fan cap, it's, to use an old term, quote-unquote, best for business, to not look at it that way and to look at the grand scheme of things, so to speak.
I think it's very common for people to react before they think critically, and I think that's natural. You know, but it's important to do some critical thinking, and even if on the surface, you know, something rubs you a certain way where you feel really strongly on one side, it's important to always sit back and say, well, what is the counter argument, and does that make sense?
Right. There's very little logic to me in a lot of the fans' opinions. You know, like we've said before, it makes absolutely no sense for the company to strong-arm her. You know, she sells merch. She's one of the most popular female stars they have. People are dying for her to come back, and I think a lot of the kind of backlash effect from fans is because they want to see her back. And it's so easy to just throw the blame on the company. You know, you're keeping Paige away from us, regardless of the injury situation, when the reality of the matter is she screwed up the first time in, you know, kind of acting like Eva Marie and not doing all the proper paperwork or whatever it was, the procedural issue. And now she's screwed up again, and people are just pissed that she's being taken away from them. So I think it definitely speaks to, you know, how well we are able to look at things and kind of use some logic in there. Sometimes I just wish that the fans would do the same, but I know that's like pissing in the wind.
Yeah. The last thing I'll just say about it is when you said that she kind of has a little bit of a child star syndrome, I think it causes her to have a little bit of a jaded sense of reality, consequentially. And, you know, the whole proposing to Alberto thing, I don't know, that when I saw that, I kind of chuckled. I thought that was a little weird. And you also said that if she does leave the company, it might be due to him. And I don't know, maybe this is just me being cynical, but they don't strike me as a couple who are going to be sitting in their rocking chairs at 80 years old. You know,
Definitely not.
And like you said, she was just engaged last year, so I think she kind of has a little bit of a jaded sense of reality. Unfortunately, that jaded sense of reality might cause her to ultimately quit the WWE, which I think she has so much to offer professional wrestling. She'll certainly make more money working for the WWE. I mean, she could have a nice lengthy career. But if I found out that she threw it away for Alberto in the year 2016 when she's 24 years old, I would be disappointed, but I wouldn't be shocked.
Yeah, I definitely don't see them going the long haul together, so to speak. If they do, more power to them. But if she was really smart, the thing to do would be to stick around with WWE, make as big a name for yourself as possible, and then if you want to go, then go. Then down the road, you'll have the door still open to you if you leave in an amicable manner and stop acting like a spoiled little brat, to come back and basically pave whatever path you want, a la Brock Lesnar or some of the other part-timers that keep coming back, because they really come in and have free reign. So if she was really thinking with her brain, which doesn't sound like she is she's thinking with her heart for however long that lasts, then, that would be in the back of her mind as well. Like, I'm going to stick here, I'm going to become as big as I possibly can, which she could be the biggest female star they have if she could just put in the effort and stay out of trouble, but her biggest issue is herself. She just keeps shooting herself in the foot.
Yeah, I agree.
Alright, so we're going to move along with the timeline. We'll move on to this week. And on Monday Night Raw, of course, the big news from Monday Night Raw, the main story, after 12 years away from the, I guess not the wrestling industry as a whole, but any kind of mainstream companies, the return of Goldberg to close out the night. So, as our resident WCW Mark, give us your overall thoughts, because I know that you weren't overly enthused about the prospect of Goldberg coming in, but now that you've seen it play out, how do you think that went?
Yeah, that's exactly it. Like I said before, it was back during the 1990s, I watched a lot more WCW than I did WWF, and so Goldberg is a guy who, when you think about the peaks for WCW, because they had some very respectable days, especially with the NWA, and especially in the '80s with Dusty Rhodes and Ric Flair. That was all great stuff. Sting was the man for years, and so other than those guys, once you start getting into WCW's biggest success, which was during the Monday Night Wars, during the late 90s, a lot of people would point to WCW and say, hey, look, you're riding the coattails of guys that made a name for themselves in the WWF, whether it was Hollywood Hogan or Randy Savage, Roddy Piper, Hall and Nash, a lot of these guys that established themselves elsewhere. And so, I'll also give a shout out to Diamond Dallas Page, but Goldberg was probably their best example of a guy that they brought in and they made a star out of.
Yeah, definitely the only one that became, I guess, a mega star, you could call it, because he was on
a phenomenon.
Yeah, he was a household name, and he was the only one. Sometimes I take exception when, not you, but I've seen this plenty of times where people say, Goldberg is the only star they ever created. I guess it depends on what your definition of the word star is, but you've got Goldberg, in my opinion, Diamond Dallas Page, Booker T, Eddie Guerrero, Chris Benoit, Rey Mysterio, Chris Jericho, Big Show. None of these guys were known.
Well, and he started when they were NWA, but Sting,
Exactly, Sting is the perfect one, perfect example, which my affection towards Sting, so.
Yeah.
So yeah, I sometimes I take exception to that. I guess if you want to use the term megastar or superstar or whatever, or face of the franchise, then Goldberg definitely would be one. But a lot of those other guys, even down to your Dean Malenkos, and nobody knew who they were before WCW, and they were not WWF guys. Just my thoughts on that anyway.
Yeah, sure. Well, and so it was funny because I knew you were gonna respond to that, but long before, a couple weeks ago, before he made this debut, there was a post on Top Rope Report about Goldberg coming back, and I had kind of quipped that, well, I could kind of take this or leave it, and you said you were surprised. And I knew you were going to be surprised, and I guess it was just the emotion at the time was, I could take it or leave it because I respect everything that Goldberg meant to WCW, everything that he meant to the business. Like, I completely acknowledge that impact. He just wasn't my cup of tea. You've known me long enough to know that I've always been drawn to the charismatic workers. It's an inside joke with the people who contribute to this website that I have an almost lifelong obsession with Chris Jericho. And so, I've always been drawn to those charismatic workers, and I always kind of viewed Goldberg as a guy who had a great look, a great build, and a great push. But I was just never, romanced by him beyond that. And so I was thinking to myself, if I wasn't too enthralled with him 16, 17 years ago, why would I be enthralled with him, when he's coming back? Goldberg's 50 now. He looks fantastic, by the way. But he's 50 now. So I'm like, if I wasn't a big fan then, why do I care about a one-off?
Which is completely understandable because, as you said, Goldberg was he was more of an aura, and it's been well documented now that he was still very green, and there was a match, I want to say it was late 97, early 98, that he had with, at the time, Lord Steven Regal on Nitro, and it was just absolutely abysmal. It was very clear that he couldn't work. So that was, up till that date, that was the longest match he had. So from that point forward, they continued with the 1.5-minute, 2-minute spear, jackhammer, 3 count, it's over. It was very impressionable on me at that age, just because he was such an ass kicker, and he really was the only character like that WCW had at the time, that could even combat anything that similar to what Stone Cold was doing, just going in and kicking everybody's ass, pretty much. As much as I was a huge fan of the whole Sting turning into the Crow storyline, which, in my opinion, was the best angle and the most well-written angle in wrestling history, covering both companies. I'm sure people will argue with me on that. But the way that they built Goldberg, they knew for a fact that he was not ready yet, and it's just they caught lightning in a bottle with that guy, and it just happened to work out.
And when he took the belt off of Hogan, could there be anything more WCW than that? Because it was such a big deal. He was white hot, and they did it, and they did it in the Georgia Dome, and he used to play for the Georgia Bulldogs. He was from Georgia, so not only is he becoming the biggest star in the company, but they're basically doing it in the dome in his hometown. They didn't even fill the dome, and you know why? They did it on Nitro. They gave it away for free, and they made the announcement, on Thunder?
Yeah.
3 or 4 days before?
It was 3
There couldn't be...
It was 3 days
There couldn't be anything more WCW than that, because it was like, you have this great thing, and if you were to build it, give it time to build, and do it at Starrcade, or do it at one of your big pay-per-views, that could have made so much money, and they gave it away for free.
Yeah, they probably could have put 100,000 people in that place if they wanted to. But yeah, they only started promoting it 3 days prior on Thunder. And oddly enough, the whole thing was Hogan's idea, because, it's no secret that at that time they were only focused on ratings. So that was why they did it. There was no long-term thinking at all, ever in WCW, which was ultimately their downfall. So moving forward to this past Monday, how do you feel WWE handled the return of Goldberg? Because to me, there was some notion, a little bit of a inkling in the back of my head that maybe he'd come back and get booed out of the building. I thought that was a total, possibility. Obviously, that wasn't the case. He was extremely well received by the Denver audience and the fans in attendance. And I think the way that they did it, where he ended his promo by saying, not only is Brock Lesnar next, but he's last. I think that's a very smart move because they're kind of planting the seeds for what we know will end up being a Survivor Series, despite what some members of the TRR staff want, who are attending Hell in a Cell. I hate to break it to you guys, but it's not going to happen at Hell in a Cell, not with less than 2 weeks promotion. So
they're not WCW.
Right, exactly. So the main concern going into Survivor Series, which is in Toronto, is we all know that when you go into Canada, it's Bizarro World, and they will cheer for the people that they're not necessarily supposed to cheer for. So I think using this storyline of it being Goldberg's last match, although I believe that it's reality-based, and this is only a one-time deal, I think they're kind of planting the seed into the fans' heads in Toronto, like, hey, this is this guy's swan song, maybe to kind of keep down the boo birds a little bit. What do you think about that?
Yeah, well, I was going to say, for any fans who might be younger and have not entrenched themselves in the network to have seen it, the last time he faced Lesnar, you would think that would be a dream match, but it ended up being booed out of the building because all the fans knew that, Goldberg was on a one-year contract and he was out of the door, and then Brock was going to move into the MMA for a little while.
NFL.
And so,
NFL.
Oh, that's right. He went to the NFL before he did the MMA.
He went to training camp with the Vikings and was the last man cut before the final rosters.
Yeah, and so to think about the 20th WrestleMania, which should be a big deal in general, and you have Goldberg, Brock Lesnar, and Stone Cold Steve Austin in the same ring, because Austin was the special guest referee, to have those three mega stars in the same ring, and it turned into just a disaster. That's unfathomable in retrospect. But that's what happened, and that was Goldberg's last appearance in WWE. I gotta say, when he came back, I was like, yeah, this will be all right. Like I said, I was never the biggest Goldberg fan in his prime, but I'm sure it's definitely gonna draw. So I was interested. Man, and especially all credit to Goldberg, he knocked it out of the park. I totally did a 180, and I was totally invested as soon as I saw it. That promo, it's ironic that he hasn't been in a WWE ring in 12 plus years, and he delivered the best promo of his life.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, and because he was pulling from reality so much, and it was so good, and he seemed, while he was a bit emotional, almost drawing a few tears there at one point. I don't know. It just he was pulling from reality, and it was great. And the ironic part is, because he hasn't wrestled full time in so long, for somebody to come back and deliver the best promo of their life, I actually think it kind of helps that he's been off the scene for so long, because I'm sure he's been making special appearances at indie shows where he can just be more relaxed and be himself. And he's also been on the podcast scene, and just so, because one of the knocks on him was he was never much of a talker. Part of that was intentional because it was part of his lore, but he was intense, but he wasn't a particularly great talker. I think he's been talking so much in other formats that it actually helped him.
Yeah, I would agree with that. He actually, I don't recall the name of it, but he did host some kind of a, car racing show or whatever. I'm forgetting the name of it or what channel it was even on, a number of years back. So he's definitely gotten a lot better at his speaking skills. The biggest thing to me is he never, ever had a reputation for being a good guy or an easy guy to work with. To me, it seems like it's possible that, because it changes all of us, he's married now and has a kid, he just seems like so much more humble, much more down to earth, and really kind of got rid of that brick wall that WCW basically forced him to put up because he had people like Hall and Nash always whispering in his ear and creating trouble.
Yeah, and you could tell that it was very sincere, that the most important part of coming back and doing this was his son seeing him, and that's a shoot, and fans can appreciate that.
Yep, definitely. Yeah, myself, I'm definitely looking forward to his in-ring return, the match, whatever you want to call it. I don't feel like he's gonna go over. I think that we'll see this parlayed into a Hall of Fame induction next year. I know me and you have talked about that a little bit. So that totally makes sense to me. I think that's where this is going. This is just gonna be a one-time deal. This is his ride off into the sunset, so to speak, because, like you said, he's not getting any younger, even though he's in way better shape now than I probably will ever be.
I was gonna say the only way that I couldn't see this be a one-off, because if I were them, I would make it a one-off. It's going to be a hard-hitting match. That they're probably going to go for a while. And I think that even though it's, in my mind, a little unthinkable that Brock doesn't win, the only way I could see it not being that way is if WWE sees its drawing power for them to do one more. I don't know.
Yeah, I've been seeing and reading and hearing that the plan since Lesnar's attack on Shane back at SummerSlam is for Shane to be Lesnar's WrestleMania opponent, which I don't like at all.
Yeah, I don't either.
That's neither here nor there. So the reason why they wanted this match at Survivor Series is because they've already got Brock's plans heading into WrestleMania pretty much solid. So yeah, I'm definitely looking forward to Goldberg coming back, even if it's turns out to be a slugfest, which it probably will be. Just letting the guy have one final match and seeing how much more humble he seems to be this time around. I'm cool with all of that. I thought everything that they did, the execution was perfect on Monday night.
Well, and also, even if Brock goes over, I think it's going to be one of those situations where Brock might go over, but he gives Goldberg the ring at the end.
Right. Yeah, I don't know that Brock's character quite warrants that. Maybe something off camera. I highly doubt it.
I was going to say, he leaves him laying and he leaves the match. But, leaves the ring for when Goldberg gets up, and I'm sure he'll get a huge ovation.
Yeah, maybe once the camera's cut off, or I don't know. We'll have to wait and see on that one, I suppose. So we're going to jump ahead. Of course, the next show after Monday Night Raw is always Tuesday night SmackDown Live. And to me, the biggest story coming out of SmackDown this week, and it has been for the last couple of weeks, so let me throw this out to you, which was very interesting to me. So today I saw that James Ellsworth is outselling everybody with that t-shirt on WWEshop.com. How crazy has this been with this unknown coming in and getting main event matches on SmackDown Live? Do you think they could be utilizing somebody on their own roster to fill this position? Or is it such a comedy routine gimmick that you kind of have to use, I guess, an enhancement talent, for lack of a better term?
Yeah, I don't think they could have done this with anybody on their main roster. And obviously, it's one of those things where, it's not. It's going to have a shelf life. But I don't doubt at all that he's selling those shirts because everybody likes an underdog, and there isn't. Not only is he not on the main roster, I know Sami Zayn is the underdog from the underground, but he's a full timer and people love him, and he's a legit guy. Like, this guy's literally straight from the Indies, and everybody knows it. And could anybody possibly have the look of a more unlikely underdog than James Ellsworth?
I don't think so. I think a lot of credit has to be given, first of all, to AJ Styles for not really caring, he could put his foot down to be like, come on guys, I'm the champion here, like, what are we doing? Are we making me into a joke? But also to Dean Ambrose, who's really been driving that, obviously Ellsworth has been the guy in the ring, but the issue is between Styles and Ambrose here. Ellsworth is just kind of playing a side role. So a lot of credit to both of those guys, and even more so to Styles for saving James Ellsworth's life last week on the Styles Clash. Ellsworth went to tuck his chin at the very last second, which that is the only move in wrestling. You are not supposed to tuck your chin. You can ask Roderick Strong, NXT's newest member of their roster, because that's how he broke his neck. So AJ saved James Ellsworth's ass on that move by not completely driving down.
Yeah, that was absolutely brutal. Or not, it wasn't brutal, but it could have been. And I've seen videos of botched Styles clashes where people tuck their chin and they get their neck screwed up. But yeah, I mean, definitely credit to Styles and Ambrose. And it's kind of a fun way to bridge the gap, I guess, because we've got Survivor Series coming up. But I want to see AJ Styles hold that belt until Mania.
I would agree.
So, especially with Cena gone, and he's already kind of done a little something, with Ambrose, and he'll probably end up meeting Ambrose again at some point. But this is a really entertaining time filler for me. And all three of them have just been doing a perfect job. That's the way I see it.
Yeah, I would not be surprised because you do have Cena gone. You don't really have another babyface challenger to AJ past Ambrose. So I think it's very possible they're trying to get as much out of this as they can, possibly to get us into December. I don't remember which pay-per-view in December is the SmackDown
I think
one.
they have TLC.
It's either TLC or Roadblock. I can't remember which one.
I think SmackDown has TLC and Raw has Roadblock. That's what I think.
Yeah, you might be right on that. So to me, I'm not necessarily sure they're leading into a title match at Survivor Series between Ambrose and Styles. I think it's entirely possible that they're just continuously adding to the tension between those two, and then they end up on SmackDown's 5-man team. So now you've kind of got that tension between them in the SmackDown versus Raw challenge match at Survivor Series.
Yeah, no, I agree. And in the meantime, I always say it's always tough when WWE tries to go goofy. Like if you're going to be goofy, you better go like all out, and you better be smart about it. Because at the end of the day, this whole James Ellsworth thing, it's goofy, but they've been executing it perfectly.
Right. It's especially working well because you know that Ellsworth is not the focal point of the angle. I think that's why it works so well. And also, just to throw this out there, there's been a lot of rumors today that it's very likely we'll see James Ellsworth get a spot in the Royal Rumble, just to throw that out there.
Did you say he is or isn't?
It's very possible. It's very possible.
I think that would probably get a huge pop.
Yeah, I think it's gonna happen. Of course, the Royal Rumble coming up in January. There has been a lot of speculation on how that will work out. However, we now know that it will consist of 15 Raw superstars and 15 SmackDown superstars. So no, there's not going to be 2 Rumbles like I've seen some people suggest. That would be absolutely ridiculous. No need for that whatsoever.
Well, SmackDown definitely gets better end of the deal then, because Raw has the bigger roster.
Exactly, I think so. Well, I mean, it all depends on how you look at it. You know, to me, you've only really got a handful of guys that you could consider top tier talent or even mid card talent to begin with. So once you go past 15, I think on either side you're really reaching into the lower card or pulling out of your tag teams, which you don't really need to do. When I watch a Royal Rumble, I like to see guys, as many as possible, with the potential to win it, because that suspends the disbelief for me. When you got the shining stars in there, it's like, really?
Of course they're not going to win an opportunity for the world title at WrestleMania.
Well, you know, anything can happen in WWE. Like, get out of here with that. That's, you know, if Primo's challenging for the world title at WrestleMania, I'm giving up my fan card.
I think, what year was it? Was it 2002? A lot of people consider it the best Rumble ever just because of how stacked the roster was.
Oh, there's been so many like that, it'd be hard to remember. I know 2002 had a pretty good one, 2003 had a pretty good one. A lot of those years did, you know, before we really started getting into the PG era. I don't recall exactly. I mean, it could have even been 2001. So moving on to some more from this week in WWE television. On NXT, there was a couple of different things, but to me, the biggest thing coming out of NXT over the last couple of weeks has been the debut of the new group SAnitY, which of course consists of Eric Young, Nikki Cross, Alexander Wolf, and Sawyer Fulton. So I was trying to kind of rack my brain earlier today and try and come up with some kind of a comparison to this group, but I really couldn't. It's unlike anything that I've ever seen. Can you ever recall any kind of a faction that would be similar to this?
No, and you know, I'm excited about their potential. At this past week's NXT, you know, some of Nikki's hysterics were, I mean, on the one hand, it's like, well, that totally fits the bill, but I'm like, easy girl, that's a little, like, you're kind of overkilling it a little bit, but I'll say this about it. I have high hopes for it. Most people who are higher than casual wrestling fans, they know all about Eric Young. And this group, and I'm thinking back to an interview that I saw, and I'm pretty sure you've probably seen the same interview, but it was when Raven talked about the flock, when they were forming the flock, and he was talking about the guys that he didn't want in the flock and why. And he said that he wasn't a big fan when it came to stables. He wasn't a big fan of retreads. You know, so for example, he said, you know, I really love Scotty Riggs, but I didn't want him in the flock because, you know, he was part of American Males, and that's an obvious repackage. Eric Young, while not for WWE, for TNA for 12 years, is an established star. He is, you know, an established go-to leader of a stable. He makes perfect sense as a leader of that stable. The other three, they've all made appearances, like sporadic appearances, but none of them have done meaningful work under WWE's payroll. They've done stuff elsewhere, and they've made sporadic NXT appearances, but by and large, they're new faces. And the thing about stables is it's kind of hit or miss. Because sometimes with stables, if maybe you're a mid-carder, but you're somewhat established, if you join a stable, it's really hot and cold. Sometimes it can help you, but sometimes it can hurt you because you went from being your own established talent to kind of being a lackey. Whereas now we've got Eric Young, who is a good leader of this group, and now you've got three others that the WWE fan base are kind of familiar with, but not really. That can only help them.
Yeah, I love the gimmick. I think it's, like I said, it's completely different than anything I've ever seen. The closest comparison I could come up with was the Wyatt family, but I mean, that's not even a close comparison, honestly. If you look at it, they're still completely different groups. Eric Young is the perfect man to lead them because, like you said, everybody, or not everybody, but majority of fans know who he is. And anytime you put together a faction, the main goal is always to get at the very least one. If you can get more, that's great. But you want one person to spin off from that group and become a star on their own. Similar to the Nation of Domination back in the day, you know. Little did anybody know at the time, but The Rock was spun out of there to become a megastar. Triple H spun off of DX, even though people knew who he was before that, but he never quite reached. It could be argued that he wouldn't have reached the level he reached if he was never a part of DX. So that's the ultimate goal anytime you put together a faction. Like you said, we've seen very small bits and pieces of the rest of the group. But yeah, I'm totally for more factions. I think factions make things more interesting, and that the company should be trying to utilize more of those because Eric Young is going to help those other three become stars. You know, they may not become a megastar, but by the time this faction is over, you'll know who they are. Similarly, when the Wyatt family came in, we all knew who Husky Harris Bray Wyatt was because he was the leader, but you didn't really know who Luke Harper and Eric Rowan were. Now you know exactly who they both are. They haven't become huge successes or anything like that. They've been battling some injuries, but you at least know who they are. So that's definitely the biggest thing that I'm looking forward to, is to see what else the rest of the group can do in addition to the credibility that Eric Young brings to them.
Yeah, and I mean it's young, but you're right. It's different, and it's the perfect combination. It's Raven's dream of a faction because you have an established guy who is a clear established leader, and then you have three others who are not very well known, but they're gonna get an opportunity by being a part of this. Whereas, like if you're a guy and you're kind of a mid-carder, or an upper mid-carder, it's always a risk to join a faction. Like when they first formed the New Day, you gotta remember, when the New Day first formed, they were getting booed out of the building. Now they're one of the best things in the company because those three guys are just so darn good that they made it good. But when you had guys like Biggie and Kofi, everybody knew who they were. It's always a gamble to join a faction.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, being a lower card guy, obviously, or lower card superstars, it's always less of a risk because it's like nobody knows who we are anyway.
You have nothing to lose.
Yeah. Also, when it comes to SAnitY, I think big props to whoever comes up with like the whole aura of the entrance, because I think that really makes a lot of the gimmick, and whoever came up with it, superb.
That music is so good.
Yeah, not only the whole spotlight effect, and they got the smoke blowing up in the ring. It perfectly done, works excellent for what they're trying to convey with those guys. So another little bit of NXT news, nothing that happened on the show this week. Something that kind of flew under the radar for a couple of weeks before really coming out last week, is Hideo Itami just cannot seem to catch a break.
I was going to say, I feel so bad for that guy.
Yeah, after missing over a year, having to have multiple surgeries on his shoulder. The first one to repair, the second one to repair the repair because it didn't take. Something happened, some issues in rehab. So he's only been back for a month and a half, maybe, at this point. And at a live event on October 1st in Largo, Florida, he was teaming up with NXT champion Shinsuke Nakamura against the new team of Tino Sabatelli and Riddick Moss. There was a botched power slam spot where Tommy got essentially spiked on the back of his head, and now he's out with a neck injury. So, looking at Tommy, the overall package, he came into NXT already a little longer in the tooth. He's on the opposite side of his 30s. Is his body breaking down after all the years of performing in Japan, and it's just now that he's come to NXT, he just can't take the physicality anymore? Or has he been just a victim of unlucky circumstance?
Yeah, I was going to say that's super tough to say because, like you said, he's on the upper end of the 30 spectrum. So, for a guy who is on the NXT roster that has spent the better part of the last year and a half on the shelf, that's a tough place to be.
I mean, honestly, it could be a little of both, because the shoulder injuries are starting to pop up more and more. We've seen Cesaro undergo one, John Cena had to go under one, so that's definitely a wear and tear. But the power slam, that's just unlucky. So, I mean, I'm hoping at this point for him it doesn't become a case where things just start to mount, and he just can never seem to get his legs under him, because he's already lost so much steam with all these new superstars coming in. He's almost been on the back burner already because of being out for so long, and then he comes back, and you got Nakamura, and you got Austin Aries, and you got Bobby Roode blowing up, and it's I don't know if this guy's ever going to catch a break.
Yeah, I was going to say, I hope for his sake that injuries aren't the reason that he becomes a case of what could have been. But yeah, because even with his shoulder surgery, he wasn't supposed to be. Originally, he wasn't supposed to be out as long as he was, and then he had complications, and he ended up out longer. He comes back, and not too long after, there he goes again. Now, I'm pretty sure it was reported that he suspected to only miss roughly 2 months, and that he could be back in December. I hope for his sake that that's the case. But yeah, we'll see. I definitely, when he went out with an injury again, especially like you said, that move wasn't so much wear and tear on your body as it was, I don't want to say fluky, but just kind of a mistake. And I just hope, I hope for his sake that, he makes a recovery and has a good next year.
Yeah, like you said, it came out this past week that he was able to avoid surgery, which is good because it would have been at least 6 months. So it's looking like an early December return is in the cards for him. So definitely hoping all the best for Hideo Itami. He's got all the potential in the world. I think having all the time off definitely improved his English significantly. So that's, if there's any kind of a plus that you can get out of all the time that he missed, like that would be the biggest takeaway for me. So let's head into what will be our final topic this week. And speaking of not necessarily injuries, but surgeries, so for the past number of weeks, there have been a lot of rumblings on social media, people spotting The Undertaker in random places on crutches. And it finally was revealed this week that The Undertaker has recently undergone an unknown hip surgery. So obviously we don't know what kind of procedure he had done. If it's a hip replacement, then obviously we're looking at a big recovery time. So let me pose this question to you, knowing that the dead man has been on his last legs for at least a couple of years anyway. Are you even interested in seeing one more match from The Undertaker at WrestleMania if he is available to recuperate in time? Which, let's see, that's about a 4-month window from now until then.
Well, I guess it just depends on who it's against. It's hard not to love Taker, but by the same token, if you love him, you have to know when to let him go. It was funny because speaking of, interviews with former superstars, and you've probably seen this one as well. I was watching one with Scott Hall, and he was talking about Taker, and he quipped that, nobody wants to see Undertaker retire, but then he said, well, maybe accept Taker.
Yeah.
He might be at that point where he'd like to hang him up. And then it's one of those situations where, it's Undertaker, so when he hangs them up, you want it to be in some kind of romanticized way that can be remembered. And
Agreed.
I think
Let me pose this to you. Let me throw this out there, because I want to say it was either last week or the week before. I felt like running my mouth off on Twitter again, which sometimes I do. Not in a bad way, only in a good way. But I made the bold prediction, because I'm sure you saw the episode of Legends with JBL on the network where JBL interviewed Sting. And Sting is, in my mind, from what I gathered from the interview, he's holding off on his own surgery because he still wants that Undertaker match. So if the situation were to be Sting versus The Undertaker at WrestleMania 33, both of them walking away after, and you got Sting and Undertaker raising each other's arms in the middle of the ring, last time we see both of them at Mania in Orlando, how's that first song?
that would be great. I would just wonder how it goes. I think both of those guys it's one of those things where if you weren't talking about a match against Sting, because and this is kind of played out. I understand that,
I think Undertaker would absolutely go over if that's what you're.
I think he would probably have to. One of the fabled matches that was probably supposed to happen at Dallas was the John Cena match. Everybody was always talking about John Cena and Undertaker, and that probably would have happened at Dallas had Cena not been injured. In terms of Sting Undertaker, I agree with you that Taker would probably go over. They're both such traditionalists, they say, well, you always go out on your back. But if it came down to those two guys and that was both of their swan songs, not only would that be a huge draw, not only would that be great, but yeah, Taker's got to win that match.
So since you brought up John Cena, I have seen recently, not from any credible sources, so we have not reported on it, so take it for whatever it's worth, but reportedly, there's been a lot more talk backstage within WWE, more serious talk of having John Cena turn heel, which could ultimately lead into an Undertaker match at WrestleMania. So obviously, my bold prediction is I don't expect that to happen. So how would you feel about it if it was a heel Cena going into Mania against the Dead Man?
Yeah, I mean, I would basically embrace. There's a lot of things I would embrace in terms of a Taker match, especially if it might be his last match. In terms of a John Cena heel turn, of course, the big argument against it has been the fact that, Cena sells so much merchandise to the kids, and things like that. The ironic part is, I feel like if Cena turned heel, then all the non-children fans who chant John Cena sucks, they might start cheering him. So it's kind of a weird case.
Yeah,
I don't know.
I think when or if Cena turns heel, he'll probably get a big pop, which will be ironic.
Right.
But I think in terms of going out on your back for The Undertaker, that's a scenario that I could absolutely see it happening, putting over.
And then it might give Cena the heat that he needs.
Exactly. See, that's kind of what I'm thinking as well. All right, Doug. I think that's gonna wrap it up for us this week. Why don't you go ahead and plug all your social media stuff for the people?
Well, the biggest thing for social media wise is that I'm on Twitter. It's at TRR_Doug. And like I said at the end of my last column, feel free to blast me for my opinions, but I am always open to just general chit chat. So if you just want to talk about WWE with somebody, feel free to hit me up.
Sounds good, man. Of course, our conversations about the world of wrestling will continue via text message and on Facebook, as they always do. And once again, thanks for joining the program, and I know I'll definitely be talking to you on the show again in the future.
Sounds good.
All right, everybody, once again, that was my good buddy, TopRopeReport.com's Doug Berrill, joining me for the WWE Week in Review, going over all the big news from the WWE the last week and a half to 2 weeks. Very well-spoken guy. Sure you'll hear him on the show again in the future. I definitely would like to urge everyone to read his column, Doug's State of Vice. It comes out every other Friday, with a new edition coming out next Friday. Not sure what that's going to be about yet, but anytime Doug pens anything, it's definitely a must-read, so you'll want to check that out. Of course, this past week, my own column had a new edition. It was another piece in my underrated files, where I look at some of the more underrated superstars who have been forgotten about in the annals of wrestling history. This time around, looking at Too Cold Scorpio, one of the real innovators and originators of the high-flying style here in North America. So if you have no idea who Too Cold Scorpio is, definitely make sure you check that out, give it a read, look up some of his work on the WWE Network. And also, I would like just to keep reiterating to everybody, keep reading TopRopeReport.com for all the most reliable news, live detailed show results like Raw, SmackDown Live, NXT, all of the pay-per-views. Of course, the next pay-per-view coming up is Hell in a Cell on October 30th. So if for some reason you aren't able to watch, if you're stuck at work, want to know what's happening, just hashtag get on top with TRR, refresh the results page every few minutes, and you can find out what's going on as it happens. So, everybody keep following TRR on Twitter, at TRR Wrestling. You can follow Doug on Twitter, at TRR_Doug. I'm also on Twitter, at TRR_E Ames. That's EAMES. You can also like us on Facebook, at TopRopeReport.com, no dot. And we're also on Instagram, at TopRopeReport.com, with no dot. So until next time, my friends, keep a lookout for more episodes of Top of the Morning. Be sure to go back and check out all our past episodes. You can find those on YouTube, on SoundCloud. You can subscribe to the show for free on iTunes. Check it out while you're driving to work in your car, hanging out, cleaning the house. Whatever you do, even if you're sitting on the toilet, you can check out our show. I wouldn't recommend it, but hey, as long as you're listening, I'm good with that. So until next time, my friends, always remember, it's not how hard you get knocked down, it's whether or not you can kick out.